Have you ever made a great looking plot in ggplot2 and then been frustrated because it requires a legend? Legends can be distracting, they can take up a ton of space, and they can also make our plots a little bit harder to interpret by removing the information that we need to understand the plot from the plot itself. I'm going to introduce you to the geomtextpath package. It complements ggplot2 by allowing you to add annotations and labels to your plots in some really flexible and unique ways. There's a blog post that accompanies this video, and you'll find all the code that we talk about today in that blog post. You'll find a link to the blog post in the description of this video. Let's get started. Here we are in our studio, and I think one of the best ways to show the power and the beauty of the geomtextpath package is actually to just start by making a plot without it. So let's load our packages. We're going to load the tidyverse and also geomtextpath. And then let's load some data. We're going to be using the vehicles data from the fuel economy package, and we're just going to be using a subset of that data, which you will see me reference in the plot below as average highway. All right, basic ggplot with a legend. We are plotting average highway gas mileage for two different types of vehicles across these years. Now, these labels for these lines are definitely necessary. We need to know what the blue line is and we need to know what the red line is. But they take up a ton of space, mostly because our labels are very, very long. But legends can just be a little distracting. It's nice to get rid of them if we possibly can. So there are a lot of different ways in ggplot and with all of its extension packages to place labels inside of your plot or to annotate things and add text. The beauty of the geomtextpath package is it's going to allow us to add a label that moves with the curvature of our lines. So let's talk about what we're going to change. In our original code, we used geomline, one of the geoms from the ggplot2 package. In the geomtextpath package, you have access to a lot of the same geoms. They just have a different name. It's the word text that's inserted in right here. So instead of geomline, we are going to use geomtextline. And we are going to be able to use all of the same options that we use inside of our ggplot geom inside of our geomtextpath geom. So let's move down. We have the same code with just a few differences. We've added label inside of our AES. We've changed geomline to geomtextline. And then we've added a theme function down here to get rid of that legend. So let's run this code and we can talk a little bit about it. Our legend is gone. Our plot now takes up the full width, and we've got these beautiful text labels that move with our plot. Here's what we've done so far is we've just kind of added some text with all the defaults and removed that legend. What if we wanted to make things a little bit clearer, move that label you see right here, right above this line so that we're able to see the actual line here, and then make this font just a little bit bigger. Here's what we can do. We can change the size here. We can use a V-adjust to do a vertical adjustment. And voila, we've got a beautiful label floating above our line, and it's a little bit bigger. So this is looking fantastic. But I'd like to explain just a little bit about the V-adjust and the size. So the V-adjust is a vertical adjustment. And because this is negative, it's moving up. And I know that that's counterintuitive, but in ggplot, a V-adjust, a vertical adjustment, usually for geoms has a default of 0.5. So if we change this to 0.5 and we run it again, our text is back in the middle. So what we're going to do is we know we want to move it up. So we know it's going to be negative. And I know that if I moved it all the way up negative 0.5, it would be a little too high. It would kind of bump it too far. So what we're going to do is just split the difference a little bit and do negative 0.25. And that's the way that ggplot works. You try some things, you move some things around until you find what you like. So it looks pretty good, but I think it can look a little bit better because it's a little bit jagged. So let's smooth this text out. We are going to add a text smoothing option, and it accepts values between 0 and 100. So I already know that 40 looks pretty good for this, but let's try some different values just to see what they look like. Let's try 75. Oh my gosh, too much. Okay, so this has spread it out or flattened it out so much that it's almost a straight line. In fact, we could do 100 here and get it to a straight line almost, but we need to back off just a little bit. So let's try something like 25. That looks a little bit better than the beginning, but not a lot of smoothing. We still got this kind of like the word rear, the E and the A are sort of on a different plane than the R. So I know that 40 or 45 looked pretty good. So let's go ahead and put it at 40 and see what we get. There we get a label that still moves with this line. It still hugs the line, but it's a little bit smoothed out and easier to read. So I think that that looks great. We have got all of the same things that we can modify about the line width and the line type. But then we've got these little adjustments here. These are the ones that are exclusively for the geom text part of this geom text line. So how did I know what those defaults were? How did I know that the default for the be just is 0.5? And how did I know to make it bigger using just a 5? Well, the default size for this is actually 3.88. The reason I know that is I can go inside of the geom itself and I can inspect its defaults. Let me run this code and I will walk you through it. All right, so here we have run geom text line with a capital G and a capital T. Then we have a $sign and default underscore AES. That is letting us access all of the default aesthetics that are baked into these lines by default. How did I figure out how to do this? Well, if you have ggplot2 loaded, you can type a capital G, geom, and you will have access to all of these geom objects that you are probably really familiar with inside of ggplot2 if you use it a lot. So let's go take a look at one. Let's just look at geom call. We want to access the next layer inside of this object. And what we are interested in is default AES, but there are lots of things to kind of look at in here. So if we use default AES, we can see some things that we're pretty familiar with inside of geom call, like the color and the fill and the line width and the alpha. When you have geomtextpath loaded, you can do the exact same thing, capital G geom, capital T text, and it's going to give you access to all of these geoms. So we can type in geom text line, type in our $sign, get to our default aesthetics and take a look at them. Our default color is black. Our default size is 3.88. We've got 0.5 for both our HJust and our VJust. And we've got a couple of other things that look really familiar from geom line, like our line color, our text color, our line width, and our line type. And then our spacing right here, that is unique to the geomtextpath part. It's the spacing in the letters. So let's move on here and talk about labels. Because so far we've just used the text portion of geomtextpath, but there's actually a whole other set of functions inside of geomtextpath that have the word label instead of the word text. So if there's a geom text line, that means that there's a geom label line as well. This is the only thing that will change in this piece of code. We'll go ahead and run that. And instead of text, we'll have a label. So if you're familiar with labels in ggplot2, they are exactly the same as text. They've just got this beautiful box around them. And of course, the box also moves with the curvature of our plot. All right. So let's talk about annotation lines and why you might want to use geomtextpath for them and why they might be helpful. We're going to create some fake data for this, and it's basically just sort of business data, and I will give you a brief look at it here. You can think of it as business data. We've got units, the price of those units, fixed costs, variable costs, and revenue. we are going to create a basic plot of two lines, the revenue and the cost. And this is a really uncomplicated plot, but you'll notice that by default, there's not a legend here. We haven't removed it, it's just not there. So, why is that happening? Why can't we tell what these lines are? Well, it's because we've created them using two separate geom lines. This is a pretty common technique. I see this a lot. Sometimes you just need to plot two different things on one plot. And since there's not one variable that we're breaking into groups, ggplot doesn't have anything to create a legend from. Now, this is totally fine because we can replace geom line here with geom text line and label these lines for us. So let's move down to our second chunk here where we have just replaced geom line with geom text line. And now we have these beautifully labeled. The only adjustments that we've made is we've increased the size just a little bit, and we've also added an HJust. Now, an HJust is just like a VJust, except for horizontal. So it's going to be moving our label left and right on the line. We saw that the default was 0.5. So 0.7 just means 70% up the line. If 50% is 0.5, then 0.7 is 70% up the line. So if we had these at their default, which is 0.5, and I ran this code, you would see that they're a little bit too close, being right smack dab in the middle. So putting them at 0.7 or 0.75 even just moves them over enough that we can distinguish them from each other. But it would be really great if we had some lines to label this point. If it could tell us how much cost or number of units we need to get to this break even point. That's the point of our plot really, is this focus on how many units do we need to create for us to start making money off of our production. So we're going to create some lines that are vertical and horizontal, and they explain this point on our graph. We are going to add a geom text H line and a geom text V line. I'm going to make this a little bit larger so that we're not squished over here. Okay, so if you are familiar with a geom H line or a geom V line or a geom AB line, that's what these two lines replace. We have got, and actually, I will show you down here. Here's the geom text AB line. So if you are familiar with those, they are functions that just create lines on your plots. And if you do them with the geomtextpath package, you're going to create lines that have beautiful labels on them. We want to create a horizontal line, an H line. That's going to need a y-intercept. We need to tell it where on the y-axis to draw our line. And then when we have a vertical line, we need to give it an x-intercept. So where along this x-axis do we want that line? Well, we know that we want it at this break-even point right here, right? So for the y-intercept, we know that we want it to be at the level of our fixed costs, which is right here. And we know for our other line, for our units, our number of units, it needs to be right here, which is the break-even units column in our data. Now, what we're doing here with our label is we're using the paste zero function to just create a label. The paste function takes two different things and smushes them together. So we can use paste zero and we can put a string together with something that we have in our data, right? So if we wanted to reference the miles per gallon and put that together with something, we could put like MPG equals and a space, because paste zero does not add any spaces for us. And then this would come out with MPG equals and then whatever the value of MPG is. So what we're doing here with this label is we're telling it to reference our data instead of hard coding in a label. That way, if our underlying data changes, so does our label on our line. So let's go ahead and run this code. And I will pull this down a little bit so that we can more clearly see this last part. That's the part that we've changed. we have got a line telling us where our units are, our line telling us what our fixed costs are, and we've been able to use a dotted line type, and we've been able to change the color to steel blue so that it's a little bit more muted. And we've also changed the H just of both of these lines, even though one of them is horizontal and one of them is vertical. So H just, no matter what, is going to move your label left and right on the line. You just kind of have to imagine that this vertical line is on its side. So H just of zero point 0.6 is moving it just a little bit up because zero point 0.5 would be in the middle of the line. All right, let's take a little bit of a turn here and talk about using just the text for geomtextpath. This is something that's really, really useful, and we're going to use the Palmer Penguins package to help us with this one. So we'll go ahead and load that data, and we're just saving it as penguins. Now for this one, I am going to increase the size of this plot window so that we can see it really well. What I want to do is create a density plot. And I can do that with geomtext density. It gives me these density lines and it also labels them, which is great. But what I want is a filled density plot. I want it to be gorgeously filled with transparent colors and be really, really, really nice to look at. And I'd like to use some custom colors. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use just the text part of geomtext density, and I'm going to combine it with the ggplot density plots that we can nicely fill with whatever colors we want. So let's move down here and first just create that beautiful transparent filled density plot. It has a legend. This is what I want to get rid of. It's helpful. It does show me what these different islands are for these penguins. These are all Adelie penguins, and we're comparing their bill length, the density of their bill length across the different islands that they inhabit. So what I want to do is use geom text density, just pull out those labels and have them float nicely on top of these lines and get rid of this legend that's taking up a lot of space. So geom text density is not going to go anywhere. We're going to keep it in our plot. We are also going to keep our label here. But when we move down to our next set of code, what we are going to do is add geom text density, but we're going to use the text only equals true option. It's text underscore only equals true. So let's go ahead and run this and we can take a look at it. All right, now we've got our labels. They're floating nicely above our lines. And let's talk a little bit about how we did this. So we have some new things here like spacing that we've used for the first time. And we also got a string in our HJust. So what is that about? We've got this horizontal adjustment that moves things left and right on a line. Well, when you've got a curve, what you can do is you can tell it to use the maximum Y value, which is the highest value on the curve on the Y axis, and it will move it up to the point. This is great for density plots because at the very top of your density plot, that's going to be your highest Y value, and you can place your label there. Now, spacing, it's another one of those, just like smoothing, it accepts values from 0 to 100. And if we put it back at the default of 0 and we ran this, we would see that our letters are just a little bit squished together, especially if we wanted to make this a little bit bigger. Maybe we were printing it, maybe we wanted it to be size 5. Everything is going to be a little bit too squished together. So we can use spacing, let's say 50, to kind of pull those letters apart. Just makes them easier to read. In fact, these are still a little bit close, so we'll go up to 75. And I think that that looks pretty good. Let's make those letters just a little bit smaller again so that we can see them on our screen with it a little bit smaller. All right, that looks great. So what we have done here, we've gotten rid of that legend. We have added geom text density with just text only equals true, and then all of the different adjustments that we want for our text. And it has allowed us to sort of pull out that text and use it wherever we want it. There are lots of different ways to use geomtextpath, all different kinds of things to play with. And this tutorial really just scratched the surface. So I hope that you have a wonderful time applying this to all of your plots and playing around. And don't forget that the full code for all of this is available in the blog post that accompanies this video. And the link for that, again, is in the description below. Happy plotting.